Thank y'all so much for joining me on this bright and cold winter morning. We are going to spend the day chatting about Canadian bacon. Actually, we're not going to spend the day chatting about Canadian bacon. We're going to talk about Photoshop's filters, which incidentally, if you are a Photoshop Elements user, Elements has nearly the same set of filters. But back to the Canadian bacon. What I'm going to be teaching you today is how to use Photoshop filters non-destructively, and that involves converting them for smart filters. And when you convert a layer or multiple layers for smart filters, it's really like you're taking cellophane, just like this wrapping of this Canadian bacon, and you're wrapping that around that layer or layers. That way the next thing that you do, such as running a filter, happens to the protective wrapper instead of what's inside the wrapper, your layer content. And that's how we're going to be running these filters non-destructively. My current favorite analogy is that of Canadian bacon here, because with this packaging you could see that if I toss it outside in the mud, well, the mud wouldn't get on the Canadian bacon, would it? No, it would not. It would get on the outside wrapper, and we would be able to wash off the mud or the dirt or whatever, and our Canadian bacon inside is still perfectly protected. So that is my current favorite analogy of how to think of smart objects and smart filters. So let's get started in Photoshop here. The first thing I want to have you do is I want to have you set up your filter menu so that it looks like mine. If I trot up to the top of the window here to Photoshop's filter menu, you'll see that I have oodles and gobs of categories in that menu. Well, back in CS6, I believe, Adobe tried to clean up that menu and they took a lot of the categories out. So I'm going to help you put them back in. So let's go up to the Photoshop menu together and choose Preferences, and let's cruise on down to Plugins. In the resulting Preferences dialog, you're going to look down here in the Filters and Extensions area and turn on that checkbox that says Show All Filter, Gallery, Groups, and Names. The reason we're going to do that is because if you access filters, and I'll just show you here, by choosing them from the menu here in this area where it starts with Artistic and goes down to Other, if you choose them from that particular part of that menu, then the name of that filter is going to show up properly in your Layers panel. However, if you choose filters from the filter gallery up here, which is what Adobe would have you do, then the name that shows up in the Layers panel simply says Filter Gallery, and you've got no way of knowing which filter that you ran. So I find that it's helpful to repopulate that filter menu so that you can choose them from this portion of the menu, and that way you get accurate naming in the Layers panel. So let's look at that one more time. Choose Photoshop, Preferences, Plugins, and just turn on that Show All Filter Gallery Groups and Names. There we go. So the first image that we're going to start out with is not Canadian bacon. It's these two people right here, and let me tell you, this is how my husband and I feel. We're in Boulder, Colorado, and it's been sub-zero temperatures for the last week. So you can tell here in this photo that we have a bit of a painterly effect going on. So what I want to start out by showing you is how you can stack up filters. So I'm going to go ahead and turn off the visibility of the layer I created for you so we can start from scratch. So I'm going to activate the layer that I want to work with, or layers. So if I had a document full of multiple layers here, then I could just click to activate one, shift click to activate others, or command click on a Mac or control click on a PC. So you just want to activate all the filters, or all the layers rather, that you want to apply the filter to. Then let's trot back up to the filter menu and choose Convert for Smart Filters. So this is just going to turn that layer or layers into a smart object and put a protective wrapper around it so the filter happens to the wrapper and not what's inside of the wrapper. So let's go ahead and choose Convert for Smart Filters. Immediately Photoshop will put that little special badge at the bottom right of the layer thumbnail. See a little extra icon right there, and that lets you know that this is indeed a smart object. Now let's trot back up to the filter menu. Now for this particular technique I am going to use the filter gallery. So let's go ahead and click the filter gallery, and a very petite dialog box is going to take over your screen. And when I say petite, I mean not petite. So let's go ahead and use the little zoom controls at the bottom left of that dialog box. Let me adjust my screen so you can see that. So there are microscopic minus and plus signs at the very bottom left of that dialog. So we'll just use that minus sign to position or make our image a zoom level that we can see most of it. So here you can see in the filter gallery, I have what appears to be a layers panel over here on the right-hand side. And I'm just showing this to you so that you understand that you can stack up filter effects for interesting techniques. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the two filters that I applied to this image, which are watercolor and water paper, by clicking to activate them in the filter gallery dialog. And then we're going to click the trash can icon to get rid of them. It's going to make us keep one filter, so that's fine. Okay, so let's say we just open this image and we're cruising around trying to find some filters that would work for it. If we want to make a little bit of a watercolor effect, we can start in the artistic category here by clicking watercolor. And you have all these nice little controls here that you can use to set up your watercolor. Well, just from experimenting myself, I'm going to enter rather a low amount on brush detail because I do want it to look kind of like a watercolor painting. And then on shadow intensity, we're going to go all the way down because I don't want it to end up too dark. And then on texture, we're just going to leave it at 1. And let's say that I like that. Well, you can keep applying multiple filters while you're in this dialog. All you have to do is click the little, looks like a dog-eared piece of paper at the bottom right section of this dialog box. So if you give that little button a click, then you're going to get a new, what Photoshop calls in this dialog, a new effect layer. You can just think of it as a new filter layer. So from this point, you can add another filter. Well, a filter that goes really well with the watercolor look is in the sketch category, and you can just click the little flippy triangles next to the name of those categories to expand or collapse them. And we want to come down and click water paper. And watch over here in this little panel area, when I click that, then that duplicate, or what appeared to be a duplicate watercolor layer, now changed to water paper. So as you add new effects layers in this panel here and you begin clicking around on the filters themselves, then those will change. So don't let that throw you that as soon as you add a new effect layer, it effectively just duplicates the one that you already had. That's normal behavior. Okay, you can also, let's go ahead and make a few changes to our water paper. Actually, those settings look pretty good. You can also change the stacking order of these effects here in the filter gallery dialog, and that's going to change the way that they're applied to your image. So right now, our image looks pretty dark. So let's just click and drag that water paper layer, if you will, beneath the watercolor layer. And you've got a little progress bar here at the bottom left that lets you know, hey, Photoshop's working on the preview, so don't freak out that you're not seeing any change in your image. So now we have a completely different look. So I just wanted to show you that because a lot of folks don't know that you can stack up filter effects here in the filter gallery and that you can rearrange their stacking order for completely different effects. So let's go ahead and click OK to dismiss this dialog, and I'll show you what I mean about how Photoshop simply names the filter that you choose when you choose the filter gallery option from the filter menu. You choose filter gallery right here, then you get a very generic filter gallery name in the layers panel. So just be aware of that. But when we start choosing filters from down here in the menu system, then we're going to get accurate layer naming. You can also, and just to prove my point on that, how useful this is, I'm going to go back up to the filter menu and I'm going to choose one of these root level filters, if you were, because what I want to add next is a dark edge vignette, and the lens correction filter is a fabulous way to get that done. So when we run the lens correction filter, you're going to see that its layer name does show up properly in the layers panel. Okay, so let's trot back up to the filter menu and choose lens correction. Now if you're in an older version of Photoshop, you may find this filter in the distort category. I believe Adobe moved it to root level in the filter menu in about CS5 or so. So if you're running CS4, you might root around in the distort category to find that lens correction filter. So let's go ahead and give that a click. And in this dialog box, we're not really going to use it to correct lens distortion that we might get in camera. What we are going to do is use it to add a soft dark edge vignette around our photo. If you are in CS5 and later, you're going to have two different tabs up here in that lens correction dialog box. So just go ahead and click Custom. If you're in an earlier version, you won't have those two tabs, so don't worry about it. Now from the custom area, let's scoot down about midway down and find the vignette slider. Okay, so the vignette section is right here, and these are the only two controls that we're going to use in this particular technique, so don't worry about all that other scary stuff. And this technique is probably the easiest one you'll ever learn in Photoshop. You're just going to grab that vignette slider and drag it all the way to the left, and that gives you a really nice dark edge vignette, which you can see appear here atop our image in the preview area. Now, if you wanted to widen the dark edge a little bit, you could click and drag the midpoint slider over to the left. But as you can see, as I keep dragging it to the left, that vignette gets wider and wider and wider. I tend to leave it about at its default setting or just a little bit to the left of that. And that's absolutely it. When we click OK, you'll see here in the Layers panel that, oh, I can tell exactly which filter I ran. So that's the difference between running them through the filter gallery or choosing them individually in your filters menu. The great thing about, one of the many great things about running filters as smart filters, or rather running a filter on a smart object, is that if I decide I don't like one of these filters, I can simply throw that one filter away from my Layers panel. So let's say, for example, I decided against the dark edge vignette. Just click and drag its filter's name in the Layers panel all the way down to the trash can icon at the very bottom right of your Layers panel, and give Photoshop a second to think about it, and you've thrown that filter away. So they're very, very handy that way. You can also toggle their visibility off and on to get a before and after effect, see if you like what you've done. To do that, just click the little visibility eye to the left of that filter's name in your Layers panel, and then you're right back to your original image. You'll also notice that we've got a big old white thumbnail here in our Layers panel that appeared beneath the image layer. That's a mask, and that lets you mask just the filter's effects, not the image visibility as you would a regular layer mask. This is a filter mask. So if I zoom into the image by pressing Command plus repeatedly on a Mac or Control plus repeatedly on a PC, I want to zoom in so you can see this effect a little bit. If for whatever reason I wanted to hide that filter's effects from a portion of the image, then I could simply click to activate this filter mask. And you know it's active because it has that white little bracket around the corners. Then with any tool that will lay down black paint, I can put black paint over the areas that I do not want that filter to be visible atop. So in the realm of the layer mask, which is really like digital masking tape, your masking tape is black instead of, say, cream colored or blue like it would be in the real world. So let's just pop over to the Tools panel here. Press B to grab the regular old brush tool. I'm going to use my brush preset picker in the options bar just to make sure I've got one of these soft fuzzy brushes active. Doesn't matter which one of these three. You just want to have one of them active. And then we can mouse over to the image, take a peek at the color chips at the bottom of your Tools panel. Make sure that black is on top. If it's not, you can press this little curved arrow to flip-flop your color chips back and forth, or press the X key. And if black is not one of your options at all, just click that little tiny icon to the left of that curved arrow, or press the D key to reset your color chips to the default of black and white. And then just make sure black is on top. So now when I come over here to the image, anywhere I paint, I'm hiding that filter's effects. And you can see my brush strokes updated over here in the Layers panel. So you get that filter mask automatically when you run a filter on a smart object, which is exactly the same as converting a layer for use with smart filters. So all kinds of editing flexibility to be had with using smart filters, or smart objects rather, in this way. Now the next thing I want to do is talk just briefly about a filter that is new in Photoshop CC, and I think this is the only CC specific technique that we're going to go over today, so don't worry if you're not using Photoshop CC yet. So y'all all know, and I'm from Texas, so I have a card that says I can use y'all all. I carry it in my purse. So y'all know that when you're shooting in camera in the raw format, which means your images are not being color corrected, sharpened, denoised, or anything, no processing is occurring in camera, that if you have Photoshop installed on your machine and you go to double click a raw image, then Adobe's Camera Raw plugin will open. It's a very powerful plugin, super easy to use. It's all slider based. So it's one of the easiest ways that you can correct color and lighting in your image. Well, what if you want to use that plugin on a format that's not raw? Let's say you're shooting in JPEG, which is perfectly fine. You can get at that raw filter in Photoshop CC easier than ever before because we have a new filter, the Camera Raw filter. So this is super, super powerful. So let's take a look at our before and after image. Here's the image that we're going to create together using the Camera Raw plugin here inside of Photoshop, and here's our original image. Now this is a stock shot, and I'm fully aware that the photographer meant for this color cast to occur on this image. It's nice and warm. I love that. But just for the sake of demonstration, let's get rid of it using the Camera Raw filter. Okay, so this is what we're going to create. We're going to get rid of the color cast. We're going to adjust the exposure a little bit, and we're going to add this nice light-colored edge vignette with the Camera Raw filter. So I just want to give you an idea of a few things that you might use that new filter for. So I'll turn off the visibility eye of the layer that I created for you. Let's go ahead and collapse our mini bridge panel at the bottom of the screen so we don't have any distractions. I'm just going to double click its tab. There we go. So now step one is just like we did on the other file. Let's activate the single layer or multiple layers that comprise your image. And then choose Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Now let's go back up to the Filter menu, and in Photoshop CC, let's choose Camera Raw Filter. And this is going to open the Camera Raw plugin that would open automatically if you were opening a raw image in Photoshop. So I'll make my window a little bit larger so we can all see it here. Like I said earlier, it's a slider-based interface. Nothing's easier to use than sliders. Very, very user-friendly plugin here, and non-destructive editing. You can always get back to your original when you edit with the Camera Raw plugin, which is a handy thing. So let's say I want to fix the color cast in this image. Well, that's easily done by changing the white balance. So I can come up here to the tool set at the top of the Camera Raw window, grab the white balance tool, and if you forget what these tools do, just point your mouse cursor at them and take your hand off your mouse, let it be still for a second, and unless you've turned them off, then these little tooltips will appear letting you know what particular tool does what. So let's go ahead and click the white balance tool. Now we're going to mouse over to our image, and you can see my cursor. Or maybe you can't see my cursor in this screen sharing program. But anyway, trust me in that the cursor is now an eyedropper. Oh, yes. So what we're going to do is just mouse over to a part of our image that really should be white. And I know from experimenting with this particular shot that that chair is white. But you can see as I keep clicking around on the image, then the color of the lighting, which is what white balance means, changes somewhat. So hopefully you're seeing a little bit of a color change here as I click around. So let's say that I like the way this looks and I'm happy with that. Then I can come over here to the right side of the Camera Raw plugin dialog, and I can adjust exposure, which you can think of as overall image brightness, drag to the left to darken, drag to the right to lighten. And the sliders themselves give you an indication of what's going to happen. We can increase contrast a little bit if we want, which is just darkening the darks a little bit, lightening the lights a little bit. And if you've got any highlights or light areas of your image that are becoming too light, you can darken them by dragging this highlight slider to the left. Or if you need to lighten your highlights, you can drag this slider to the right. Photoshop doesn't really have any controls that let you target highlights and shadows this simply. So this Camera Raw plugin is pretty amazing stuff. Here is our shadow slider. If we want to darken our shadows a little bit, we can drag that to the left. Or if we want to lighten our shadows, open them up, as it were, then we can drag that slider to the right. And again, the sliders themselves, if you look at the bar behind the slider, you get an indication of what's going to happen depending upon what direction you drag in. So that's a handy thing. Now, if you've got any highlights that become completely overexposed, this slider right here can help you darken them. And likewise, if you have any shadows in your image that become completely black, meaning they're plugged up entirely and you can see no detail in them, you can drag this slider to the right. Clarity is a really nice one. It adds contrast in the midtones. Vibrance is going to give your colors a nice boost without giving you hot pink alien-looking skin. So the vibrant slider tends to leave skin tones alone, whereas saturation just saturates everything. You can think of these as color intensity. So just to give you an idea of how far we've come, very easily, just by tweaking a few sliders visually, not by having to memorize any kind of magic numbers or math. Let's take a look at the before by pressing the P key for preview. We're just going to be toggling that preview checkbox off and on. So there's our before, and there's our after. So this, folks, is why you might want to get hold of the Camera Raw plugin inside Photoshop and use it on images that may not be raw in format. The next ultra cool thing I want to show you about the Camera Raw plugin is its flexibility in adding those edge vignettes that we looked at a second ago. We did a dark one with the lens correction filter over in Photoshop. Well, you've got a far more powerful edge vignette control here in the Camera Raw plugin. But again, used to be darn hard to get at, not so much in Photoshop CC. So let's click the Effects panel right here, the tiny little button. And you can see here we've got a whole section called Post-Crop Vignetting. So vignetting is what that edge effect is referred to. If you want to add a dark edge vignette, you're going to click the Amount slider and drag it toward the left. You can see the slider itself gets darker on the left and lighter on the right. So for a dark edge vignette, we're going to drag to the left. For a light edge vignette, we drag to the right. See how easy this is? Now I'm going to go ahead and use the dark one for just a moment so I can illustrate what these other controls do, just because it's a little bit easier to see with a dark edge vignette rather than a light. The midpoint is the same slider that we looked at over in the lens correction dialog. Drag it to the left to widen that edge vignette, or to the right to make it a little bit thinner. The roundness is one that I really love, and you cannot get at this in Photoshop. So look what happens when I drag that slider to the left. See how it's now becoming more of a rounded rectangle? So this lets you control the shape of the vignette itself, which is really handy. Because depending upon where your focal point is, a straight oval vignette may not work for you. So the ability to change the shape of the vignette itself is oh so handy. The feather slider, as you might suspect, lets you determine how soft the vignette edge is. As you can see, as I drag it to the left, it becomes more hard. It's never going to become a real hard edge, but it'll look like it. And as I drag it to the right, it gets softer and softer and softer. So lots of flexibility here in Camera Raw for adding that edge vignette. And I was trotted to Olin Mills Portrait Studios as a small child in Texas yearly on a schedule. And this effect is exactly what Olin Mills would do to every single portrait. They would add that dark edge vignette on there. So you can be your own little Olin Mills studio. And it really does help eliminate a distracting background. It makes the viewer's eye go right to your focal point. So when I'm processing photos for clients, I do this on just about every portrait, but with the flexibility that the Camera Raw plugin gives me. So let's just go ahead and drag that Amount slider back toward the right side for a light edge vignette. And then we can click OK, and then we're right back to Photoshop. And if we decided that we wanted to further fine-tune those changes that we made using the Camera Raw filter, all we have to do is double-click the filter's name in the Layers panel, and that plugin pops right back open with all of your changes so you continue fine-tuning your filter effects. So that's a real handy filter that is new in Photoshop CC. Now, Actually, let me show you how to get to that filter one more time. So here we are back at our original. We activated the layers that we wanted to affect. We chose Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, and then in Photoshop CC, choose Filter, Camera Raw Filter. And we adjusted these sliders right here. We reset our white point using this little eyedropper right here, and we added the edge vignette by clicking the little effects panel and by manipulating the controls in the post-crop vignetting section of the Camera Raw plugin. All right, let's hear it for repetition. Okay, cruising onward, let's talk about the Liquify filter. Actually, let me close up some of these images because they're kind of big and we don't want Photoshop losing its mind. This mini bridge panel is incredibly handy. You can open it if you've installed it if you're running Photoshop CC by choosing Window, Extensions, Mini Bridge. And it gives you like a quick access to the big version of Bridge, which is Adobe's image organization and browsing powerhouse. All right. So the Liquify filter is very, very powerful, and you may have used it before to push and pull pixels around, but what I want to show you today is how to use it non-destructively. Now this part is new in CC. Okay? To use the Liquify filter as a smart filter, meaning you can run it on a smart object, that is new in Photoshop CC. But if you've got any other version, just duplicate the layer that you want to run the filter on, and then you can still follow along. So over here in the Layers panel, let's take a peek at what we've got. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in on the image by pressing Command plus or Control plus on a PC. And if I toggle the visibility of the layer that I made for you off and on, then you can see that we're going to be making some changes. See, I can only get away with doing this on pictures of me. If I used any of my friends, they'd lose their minds. So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be adjusting a little bit of skin over here because I don't know what is going on with that, but nevertheless we're going to get rid of it. And we're going to thin out my smile over here just a little bit, and we're going to increase the size of my teeth because I hate my little baby teeth. And we're going to give me some bigger lips because I really hate my tiny little skinny lips. And so we can do all of that and much, much more with the Liquify filter non-destructively, which is very, very handy. So step one, if you're using Photoshop CC, is to activate the layers that you want to adjust and then choose Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. If you're using any other version of the program and you have a single layer, just duplicate it by pressing Command-J on a Mac or Control-J on a PC. You can think of that as I'm jumping this layer content up onto another layer. If you have multiple layers in your document that you want to use the Liquify filter on and you're using Photoshop CS6 or earlier, then you're going to create a stamped copy of those layers by activating them. I'm just going to go ahead and add another layer arbitrarily to demonstrate this. So let's say I've got two layers. I've got a levels adjustment layer and I've got an image layer. Then you can activate the layers that you want to create the copy of. And then you're going to press the world's most awful keyboard shortcut to memorize. And just look at your fingers. If you look at your fingers on your keyboard while you're doing this keyboard shortcut, then you will remember the positioning of your fingers more so than the actual keyboard shortcut. But the keyboard shortcut is Shift-Option-Command-E on a Mac or Shift-Alt-Control-E on a PC. Okay, so I'm going to activate the layers that I want to do that command on, and maybe it won't let me do it on a locked background layer. We'll see. There we go. So if you've got a locked background layer, just go ahead and give it a quick double click and rename it anything else. So when I did that keyboard shortcut, and I'll do it one more time here, activate all the layers, Shift-Option-Command-E on a Mac or Shift-Alt-Control-E on a PC, and you can remember the E for eek. That's an awful keyboard shortcut. See how now I've got another layer that contains all the information on those previous layers. So that's a workaround if you're not yet using CC and you want to run Liquify on a document that's got a bunch of layers in it. But I'm going to go ahead and delete all those guys, and we're just going to go the Smart Object route. So activate the layers, choose Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, and then trot right back up to the Filter menu and choose Liquify. Now this is quite the complicated dialog. Let me resize my screen just a hair so y'all can see all of it. And I just want to focus on pushing and pulling pixels around. Now we're going to zoom in a little bit first, and your keyboard shortcut for your zoom does work here in this dialog preview. So press Command plus on a Mac or Control plus on a PC. Then you can move around, you can reposition the image while you're zoomed in by pressing and holding the space bar, and your cursor is going to turn into a little hand, which you likely cannot see here. And then you can move the image around on your screen while you're zoomed in. So I'm going to zoom in actually a little bit more and scoot over to this offensive skin phenomenon. Oh, and now let's come up to the controls in the Liquify dialog. So the Liquify filter is really a plug-in. It's a little application that's running inside Photoshop. That's why it has its own set of tools here. Well, before we start pushing and pulling pixels around, I want to make the change not very noticeable. I don't want people to look at this photo and go, aha, she photoshopped her arm here. So what I want to do is I want to freeze my shirt area. So that's the big thing I want to show you with this filter is a lot of folks skip this step, and it's a real important one. So we're going to come over here to the Tools set in the Liquify dialog, and we're going to click that fourth one to the bottom, Freeze Mask. Give it a click and then mouse over to the area of your image that you do not want to change. That's near the area that you do want to change. You've got a little round brush cursor right here. You can use your left and right bracket keys to change brush size. Right bracket key goes up in brush size. Left bracket key goes down in brush size. And those keys are next to the P key, as in Paul McCartney, or Judas Priest if you're a metal fan like I am. So what we're doing here is we're just telling Photoshop, hey, don't mess with this area of the image. And if you're painting at home and you don't see that little red overlay, then just make sure that the Show Mask checkbox is turned on over here on the right-hand side. Now, let's go grab the topmost tool, the Forward Warp tool, and let's start moving some pixels around. So now, as I click and drag upward, even though my brush is touching that red area, it's not moving. So what I'm doing is preserving the pattern. Did we lose our screen sharing? We may have lost our screen sharing here. I'm being told by the software here that the Java plugin has crashed, so it may not like the Liquify filter at all. Yes, can you come in here and let me know if...
Hey there. Yeah, I'm here. We can still see your screen. It looks like it's frozen from where you left off. Is it possible to relaunch the screen share?
It is possible to relaunch the screen share. It told me it crashed, so I may have to completely go out of the applet.
Okay, we'll give it just a moment.
Yeah, let's say reload.
Okay, well, Lisa's reloading the screen share there for you all. If you do have a question for Lesa and what she's talking to you about and showing you today, you can send that in and we'll take as many as we have time for towards the end of the program. How you can do that is you have a little group chat widget in your widget tray. It's right there. It says group chat. Click on it, open it, type in your question, send it in, and again, we'll take as many as we have time for. And while we're waiting here for just a moment, we do want to let you all know another reason to open that group chat is we have a special code that we pushed out to all of you. And that code will save you some money as a thank you for attending Lesa's webcast today. Lesa has many great O'Reilly missing manual books for Photoshop and, of course, her iPhoto missing manual book. You can get all that at a great price today, again, as a thank you for attending. So we do hope you take advantage of that. We'll just check in with Lesa here for a moment.
Yeah, it looks like our, oh, here it comes. Our internet went down momentarily. Okay, so let me try to go back and screen share again. Dun, 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 dun. This is exciting stuff. This is bleeding edge right here, folks.
Yes, folks. You can tell it's live.
Okay, let me see if it'll let me get my screen share back. There we come. There we are. Adjust it just a tiny bit more.
And folks are being really, really appreciative here, Lesa. They're saying they understand that the cold weather will sometimes do this, and they're saying that they really are learning a lot and enjoying your presentation. So thank you, folks.
Oh, good.
Yay, and here comes the screen share. It's reloading now.
Woo! All right.
So, all right, back to you, Lesa.
All right, back to this arm situation over here. Okay, so we've already got a Smart Objects. Now let's go back to the filter menu and choose Liquify. And hopefully, and now we've got mail coming on here. We'll just quit out of that. There we go. All righty. So again, let's zoom in. And the first thing we want to do here, this will serve as our repetition, right? Let's go ahead and use this Freeze Mask tool right here. It's the fourth one from the bottom, and this is very handy when you're going to be pushing pixels around near any patterns that have lines in them, or if you're going to be moving pixels around near pixels that you don't want to move, which would give your retouch away, which is bad. You don't want to do that. So I'll zoom in just a little bit more here and move over. So you can see from this red overlay that I have masked that area, or I've frozen it. So nothing's going to happen to that area even if I brush across it. And if you're not seeing that mask, just turn on the Show Mask little checkbox on the right-hand side of the Liquify dialog. Now let's go grab the Forward Warp tool, the topmost tool, and using our bracket keys, the right bracket key to go up in brush size or the left bracket key to go down in brush size, we can begin to click and drag while holding our mouse button down, and we can repair that area. And as you can see, the shirt area is not changing, which makes the retouch look as realistic as it possibly can. So freezing important areas before pushing pixels around in the Liquify filter is the big takeaway from this. Now, another new thing that we got in Photoshop CC, and what I just showed you is not specific to CC, but what is specific to CC is this new little icon right here. It's the third tool down. It's called the Smooth tool. You'll notice that as I was pushing and pulling around here that we've got a little bit of, let me zoom in, the skin doesn't look real natural. Okay, it looks a little wavy, as it were. Okay, I'll make it a little bit more extreme to show you. What we can do is smooth it out using that new tool. So let's click it once to activate it, and then just brush across that area. And what it does is it reveals a little bit of the original image to smooth out your change, because when you're using that Forward Warp tool, it is very easy to make things look wavy and a bit unnatural. So that's why Adobe gave us this very handy smooth tool in CC, and you can just brush across that area. If we kept brushing across it, we would eventually be back to the original image. But you can think of it as a low opacity revert to original command. It's just going to smooth out that area just a little bit. And as you can see, the area that we froze did not move. So that's very, very handy. So just to show you one more time, let's come over here to the right side of my face here. And let's say if I want to scoot this cheek in leftward so my smile isn't quite as large, then I want to freeze that earring because I don't want that earring to start getting all floppy-jawed. So let's go back to our Freeze tool. Come over here to the area that you're going to fix, and you're just going to paint to freeze that one spot so that it doesn't move. So now we can come back and grab our Forward Warp tool, and I can scoot that area in just enough where my smile doesn't look quite as big. And like I said, I really loathe my small teeth, so if I wanted to make those a little bit larger, I don't really have to freeze anything for that. But I could come over here and grab the Bloat tool, and I could click around on those teeth. Oh yeah, baby. This is big fun right here. Don't ever let clients watch you do this. They will be mortified. And you do not want to give away your secrets. If I want to make my lips a little bit bigger here too, I could do that. So this is big fun right here. And if I was doing this for real, I would take a lot more time with it to make it look more realistic. But you guys get the point. When you're finished, go ahead and click OK. So now we've got our little Liquify filter here in the Layers panel, and I'll scoot my image down so you can see. So I could toggle the visibility off on the Liquify filter and back on to see how far I've come with that change. And again, if you want to fine-tune anything that you did in that filter, just double-click the filter's name in your Layers panel, and that filter will pop right back open, and you can continue adjusting that image. So that's very, very handy. So let's go ahead and close that one. And just so you know, that Liquify filter also works on text. So here you can see that I've created some text. So all I did was grab the type tool, add some text to the document, turn the type layer into a smart object, and then run the Liquify filter. So you can push and pull pixels around of letters as well. So just keep that in your back pocket when you need to create any special effects. Now the next technique that I want to show you is a real neat glamour-glow effect. So we're going to use a couple of different tools, as it were, on this image. This is a great technique to have in your back pocket to create a romantic feel. We'll do it on the bride shot first. If you want to create a romantic feel, this is a great way to do it. Or if you want to smooth out uneven skin tones, this is another great way to get that done. So let's take a peek at our before image. So I'm going to Option or Alt-click the visibility eye of the only layer that I want to remain on in Photoshop. So Option or Alt-click it, and you'll see our before and our after. So we've definitely got that dreamy, romantic, glamour glow thing going on. But the way we're going to build this effect up, you can see here in my Layers panel that we've got several layers going on. It's completely non-destructive and infinitely fine-tunable. We're going to be building it all on separate layers so that we can drop the opacity of any one of our steps in order to fine-tune it on a portrait-by-portrait basis. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the visibility, or actually I'll delete these layers, and we'll just start from scratch. So activate the layer or layers that you want to run this effect on. Okay. Now we're going to duplicate the layer. Okay, so I've got one layer here, so I'm just going to press Command or Control J. If you had many layers, then you would do that stamped trick we talked about a moment ago, which is Shift Option Command E or Shift Alt Control E. Okay, and Photoshop's not playing nice with me. There we go. Duplicate your layer by pressing Command J or Control J. And the next thing we want to do to that duplicate or stamped copy of layers is turn that into a smart object. So let's go up to the Filter menu and choose Convert for Smart Filters. Now the next thing we want to do is we want to blur this image a little bit. And we want to blur it just a tiny bit. And this is going to require just a little bit of math. So what we want to do is we want to find out the largest pixel dimension that's in our image, either width or height. And you can easily do that by choosing the Image menu, Image Size, and then just peeking right here in the width or height field. So my largest dimension, either by width or height, is about 4,100 pixels. So I'm just going to multiply 4,100 pixels by 0.007. Why 0.007 is going to be your next question, and that's because you want to blur the image at about 0.6% of the largest pixel dimension. Well, that's darn hard to remember, but what you can remember, at least if you're a James Bond fan, is 007. So I'm going to grab my calculator, which I've already got open here. So I would simply type in 4,100 or 4,129 if I wanted to be super exact about it, times 0.007. So I want to run the Gaussian blur at about 28 radius, or strength rather. Okay, so all we did was choose image, image size, find out the largest pixel dimension, either width or height, grab your calculator, enter the largest pixel dimension, multiply it by 0.007. You just want a tiny amount of blur, but that's going to change depending upon the pixel size or pixel dimensions that are in your image. Okay, so 28 points. So now let's come back up to the filter menu and choose blur, Gaussian blur. 28 radius rather. So we're just going to enter 28 in the radius field right here. Click OK. Now we're going to set the blend mode of this blurred layer to something in this overlay category right here. And in fact, we're going to choose overlay. Overlay will create a little bit of a stronger glamour glow. Soft light will create a little bit of a softer glamour glow. And we're going to do this one again, and we'll use soft light on the next image. So let's choose overlay. So now we're really just seeing through this layer to a little bit of what's on the layer below. Okay, so these blend modes just change how color on one layer interacts, blends with, knocks out color on other layers. Now the next thing we're going to do is add a hue saturation adjustment layer that's going to allow us to change the coloring of this image. So let's come down to the half black, half white circle at the bottom of your layers panel, and let's choose hue saturation. Now we're going to do two things. We're going to clip this hue saturation adjustment layer, or attach it rather, to the layer underneath it. So in other words, instead of this adjustment layer affecting all the layers underneath it in your layers panel, we want to tell it to affect one layer down. And that's a real handy thing to know how to do no matter what you're doing in Photoshop, is how to attach an adjustment layer to the layer underneath it so that it only affects that layer. And the way you do that is by clicking this little leftmost icon at the bottom of the Properties panel. That automatically opens when you add an adjustment layer. So now you can see in our layers panel how that little icon scooted over to the right a little bit, and now we've got a little down pointing arrow. So that's Photoshop's way of saying, hey, I am attached or clipped to the layer underneath me. And if you want to unattach it, just click that little icon again. The next thing we want to do in this Properties panel is turn on the Colorize checkbox. And that's going to allow us to evenly add change colors in our image here. So now let's just drag the hue slider, and you can see the colors changing in the image as I do that. Typically with this technique, you're going to want to have the hue slider somewhere in the blue range of colors here. It tends to look better that way, but by all means, experiment on your own. But I like the way this image looks when I grab my hue slider and drag it over to the blue range of colors. Now the next thing you want to do is adjust the strength of this particular look. So let's go back to the Smart Object layer here, and you can drop the layer opacity, and that will allow you to see through to some of the original image, but still maintaining this kind of soft, glamour, glowy, romantic feel that we have created with this technique. So again, here's our before, here's our after. If you're doing any kind of portraits for the holidays or your own Christmas cards, and you want to even out the skin tones, or you want to give everybody a subtle glamour glow look, this is a fabulous way to get it done. And to hide that look from anywhere on the image, let's say you've got a Christmas tree in the background, if you only want the glamour glow to apply to the people, then you would just click the Smart Object layer and you'd add a layer mask to it. And wherever you paint with black inside that layer mask, that look that you just created is going to be hidden. Okay, so right now I just hid that glamour glow from her eyes. So that's another option that you've got here. But let's do that whole thing again on another image. Okay, so let's take a look at what we're going to create. Here's our before, and here's our after. See how you just get a nice little glow? So let's go ahead and delete all the layers I made for you, and let's start over. So activate all the layers that you want to run this technique on, and if it's multiple layers, go ahead and create a stamped copy by pressing Shift, Option, Command E, or Shift, Alt, Control E. Or if it's just a single layer, go ahead and duplicate it by pressing Command or Control J. The next step is to convert that duplicate or stamped copy into a smart object by choosing Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Now we're going to run a Gaussian blur, but we need to find out what our biggest pixel dimension is. So let's come up to the image menu and choose image size. And it looks like 2000 is our largest pixel here. Now we can grab a calculator, type in 2000 times, what's our favorite super spy? 007, 0.007. So we need to run a blur at a strength of about 14. Now let's come back up to the filter menu, choose blur, Gaussian blur, and we're going to enter 14 as the radius here. It just keeps you from going overboard on the blur. Now let's change the blend mode of this layer to either overlay for a slightly more pronounced glamour glow or soft light for a slightly understated glamour glow. So let's go understated this time and choose soft light. Now let's go ahead and add our hue saturation adjustment layer by clicking the half black, half white circle at the bottom of the layers panel. Choose hue saturation. Now we're going to clip this saturation layer to the layer that's underneath it. So let's click that little leftmost button at the bottom of the properties panel. Now let's turn on the colorize checkbox. And then we can, let's scoot our properties panel out of the way so we can actually see our focal point. Now we can experiment with the hue slider to get the look that we want. And here again, I'm tempted to go somewhere in the blue range of colors with the hue slider. And if you, let's say you give this to a client or you print it out and you decide you want to fine tune this some more, if you've saved this as a Photoshop document, to get back to these controls, if you close it, I'll just go ahead and close it here. All you have to do is double click the icon of that hue saturation adjustment layer and that properties panel pops right back open so that you can continue to fine tune your colors if you'd like. So it's very, very flexible, non-destructive editing. Now what we can do is lower the strength of the effect as a whole by clicking to activate the Smart Object layer and dropping its opacity to something that looks good to you. For this particular image, somewhere around 50% looks good. So here's our before and here's our after. And see how her freckles are smoothed out just a little bit, but yet they're still there, so she still looks like herself. Now you'll notice that the irises of her eyes darkened quite a bit with this technique. Perfect opportunity for a layer mask. So with that Smart Object layer active, let's add a layer mask by clicking the circle within a square icon at the bottom of your layers panel. Press B to activate the regular brush tool. Make sure that black is your foreground color chip at the bottom of your tools panel, and then mouse over to the image. Use your brush cursor or use your left and right bracket keys on your keyboard to change brush size. And when you're painting with black, we'll zoom in just a little bit more, what we're doing is we're hiding whatever is happening on that layer in that area where we painted with black. So now when we toggle our visibility on and off, you'll notice the irises aren't changing. So just be on the lookout for any areas that, mainly the eyes, that maybe darken with this technique. But it's a real pretty thing to do with portraits. Again, here's our before and here's our after. It gives you just a little bit of that dreamy, dreamy glamour glow. So we'll go ahead and close those images up. Hopefully these are filter techniques that maybe you've not seen before, and I believe they really will be quite useful in your Photoshop life here. Now the next thing I want to show you how to do is another fun one, also great for holiday projects or just for fun, is how to add motion to your photos. So this is what we're going to create right here. Let me toggle the visibility back on in the filter. We're going to make this family of superheroes appear like they're flying through the air. So again, we're going to use smart filters. So activate the layer or layers that you want to create the effect on, and then trot up to the filter menu and choose Convert for Smart Filters. Next, trot right back up to the filter menu, choose Blur, and this time we're going to choose Motion Blur. In the handy little dialog box that appears, if you want to create a perfectly vertical blur, then you're going to enter 90 degrees here in the angle field. And for strength, You can think of this as strength. It says distance, but just think of it as strength. That's going to be your own call of how much of a pronounced blur you're going to want. For this particular image, somewhere around 150. Looks pretty good, but again, experiment with that. Click OK, and Photoshop applies your filter. You see it stack up here in the Layers panel. But the only problem with this is that we've effectively rendered our family unrecognizable. So what we want to do is hide the blur from a specific spot. And because we use smart filters, we already have a filter mask. So let's go ahead and click to activate that mask. So it's got that little light color bracket around it. We've already got the brush tool active. We already have our foreground color chip set to black. So now let's just come over here to the image and paint across the area that we don't want that filter to be visible atop. So that's how you can hide just the filter, and by using smart filters you get that filter mask automatically, which is really, 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 really handy. So let's just do that one again. I'll go ahead and back out of that. So we've already got our smart object, so activate the layer or layers, choose filter, convert for smart filters, go back to the filter menu, choose blur, motion blur. For a perfectly vertical blur, you're going to enter 90 degrees in the angle field, and you're going to experiment with distance to see what looks good to you. Just think of that as strength. Click OK, and then to hide the filter's effect, no matter what it is, from a portion of the image, click to activate the smart filter mask that came with the whole act of running filters as smart filters. Grab any tool that will lay down black paint. The brush tool works really well. Set your foreground color tip to black. Use your bracket keys to adjust brush size, and then just paint across the area that you want to hide the filter. Now, if you mess up and you hide too much of the filter, you don't have to start over. All you have to do is flip-flop your color chips, bottom of your tools panel, so that you're painting with white. So I'm going to press X to flip-flop my color chips, or press the little curved arrow, and then that will reveal the filter. So there's a handy little rhyme that will help you remember that, and that is, when you're dealing with layer masks, painting with black conceals, painting with white reveals. So black conceals, white reveals. So that way you don't have to start over. But you can see this is a neat little effect to have in your bag of tricks, especially if you're shooting children in your photography business, or if you're a graphic designer. Now, a variation on that same effect that I kind of like a little bit better than the regular motion blur filter is to run a radial blur. So you're going to get kind of a round blur, but we're going to set it to an option called zoom. And this one is really, really cool. So we're going to create this effect shown here. And we've got a little cat action going on in the house here, which is always a lot of fun. So here again, we're going to start with activating a layer or multiple layers if your image consists of multiple layers. And then we're going to go to the filter menu, choose convert for smart filters. Then we're going to go back to the filter menu, and we're going to choose blur, radial blur. Now this is a really neat one right here. It lets you do a lot of different things in this radial blur dialog. First of all, we've got the amount slider, which is fine. You can experiment with that to your heart's desire. We're going to set this one around 50 or so. But you've got two different options for blurring here. You've got spin, which is the default option, and that's going to create what you're seeing here in the blur preview. You don't actually get a preview of this one. I guess it takes a little bit too much processing power to render a preview in the dialog. But with these little lines, Photoshop's trying its very best to let you know what it's going to do to your image. So click zoom instead, and that's going to give us this kind of zooming out effect. Then we're going to turn on best here for quality. And the super cool thing about this dialog is that you can change the epicenter of the blur by clicking and dragging in this preview. So if I want the blur to emanate from the little boy's face, I'm going to guesstimate where that face is if you consider that this is a miniature of the whole document. I know it's not the right aspect ratio, but just play along with me here. You're just going to position that center point, roughly about where your focal point is, and click OK. And Photoshop is going to render the effect. And I did pretty well on guessing where the epicenter is, but if you want to change it, because you use smart filters, all you have to do is double-click that radial blur. Filter again and fine-tune the center point, and Photoshop will move it around. Now we want to again click that filter mask, come over here with the brush tool, set to paint with black, so take a peek at your color chips. I see that black is my background color chip right now, so I need to flip-flop it by clicking that little curved arrow or by pressing X. And then I can go down in brush size by pressing the left bracket key, and I just want to hide the blur from the little boy's face. So to me that is a super duper cool, super useful technique on adding motion, and I really like that spin effect, or the zoom effect rather. So one more time real quickly. After you've created your smart object, come down to the blur menu in the filter menu, choose radial blur, and you're going to turn on zoom. Okay, it's going to be set to spin, but you're going to turn on zoom, turn on best, and then adjust the strength using the amount slider. But the big deal is to change the zoom's epicenter by just clicking and dragging with your mouse around in this little preview area. Click OK, and then we're going to use the included smart filter mask by using the brush tool, set to paint with black, to hide that zoom effect from the focal point. And I know we've kind of run out of time here, but I want to show you one more thing because we lost our internet there for a second. So I want to show you just a couple more techniques, if that's okay with Yasmina. These I think are real useful.
Please go ahead. We've still got lots of folks on the line with us, so back to you.
Excellent. So now what we're going to do is we're going to make a pencil sketch effect. And I'm going to show you two different ways to do it. So we're going to create a colored pencil sketch from a photo. So that's what we're going to do right here. Here's our before, and here's our after. Christmas colors, anyone? Yes? And we're also going to create a regular pencil sketch. Okay, so this one probably looks a little bit more like a pencil sketch, but let's go ahead and walk through the technique for creating each one. It is gloriously non-destructive, so if you don't like what you've done, you can back out of it really easily. So I'm going to go ahead and delete the layers that I made for you here and turn on our original layer. So what we want to do is go ahead and view our image in black and white, because as we fine-tune the different steps of this technique, it's going to be easier to see what's happening if you're viewing it in black and white. Theoretically, you could save this step till the end, but just in my own testing, it's a little bit more intuitive if you're seeing the image in black and white to begin with. So let's go ahead and do that by adding a black and white adjustment layer. And again, most of these techniques we're seeing today have been around in several versions of the program. So let's trot down to the bottom of our layers panel and click the half black, half white circle and choose black and white. Now, on your own at home, feel free to adjust the contrast of the black and white, but for this particular demonstration, we'll just let it roll with the default settings. The next thing you want to do is go ahead and activate the image layer or multiple layers, and let's turn that into a smart object by choosing Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Now the filter we want to run is in the Stylize category. So let's choose the Filter menu, Stylize, Find Edges. This is going to allow Photoshop to go through and find areas of high contrast and greatly exaggerate them. So we're just accentuating our edges here, and we're starting to get a pencil sketch look already. The next thing we want to do is we want to change the blend mode of the filter itself, not the blend mode of the layer, but of the filter itself. And the only way you can do this simply is by using smart filters. So let's go ahead and double-click the tiny microscopic icon to the right of the filter's name in your Layers panel. When you double-click that, you get this blending options dialog. But these are blending options just for the filter, not for the image layer, which is what you get if you were to use the blend mode menu at the top of the Layers panel. Okay, so we just double-clicked this little icon right here. Now let's change the mode to something that's going to also greatly exaggerate our edges, which is something in the overlay category. And you can experiment on your own. But in my test, hard mix works pretty well for further accentuating those edges. And we're also going to lower the opacity of the filter itself to about 85%. Now that number is going to vary on an image-by-image basis, so you're just going to have to experiment. But try hard mix, try 85% on opacity, and we're really just going for a pencil sketch look, so you'll have to adjust that number according to your own liking. Go ahead and click OK. Now we're basically done with the technique at this point, but a true pencil sketch doesn't quite have the hard edges here. So let's run a slight blur. So let's trot up to the filter menu, choose blur, Gaussian blur, and we're just going to run it with a very small amount. So I've got a decent sized image here going on, so I'm just going to enter a radius of about 2. You just want a small blur. So I say if it's a really big honking image, maybe 4. But if it's a medium-sized image like this one, somewhere between 1 and 2 is going to be just fine. We don't want to blur it a lot. We just want to blur it a little bit to make it a little bit more realistic. And then click OK. And now for the blur filter, we're going to change its blend mode. So let's go ahead and find the filter's name in our Layers panel, scoot over to the right, and double-click that little icon to bring up the blending options for the blur filter. And for this one, we're going to change its mode to lighten. And that is going to further fine-tune our pencil sketch look here. And that's really all that you need to do. Now, if the image that you're working with didn't have a whole lot of contrast to begin with and you're not getting the kind of pencil sketch effect that you want out of it, then you can fine-tune it at this point by double-clicking the little layer thumbnail of the black and white adjustment layer. So this one's got a lot of blues in it. As I fine-tune these sliders, see how I'm getting more or less of an edge on some of my characters. Incidentally, this is St. Peter's Square in Rome. I was shooting with a 200mm zoom lens, and these are the statues that are on top of the columns that Bernini designed. And thanks to lensprotogo.com for letting me borrow that lens. Lens Pro To Go is a great resource if you want to rent equipment. Try it before you buy it, so to speak. So all we did here was double-click the layer thumbnail of the black and white adjustment layer, and we can use those sliders to fine-tune our pencil sketch. But I find it's easier to do that after you've trotted through all these steps, because otherwise you have no idea really how far to adjust the contrast. So let's go ahead and do that one again, and I'll show you one more added step, or an additional step that creates a colored pencil sketch. And happily we are going to be capturing this as a video so you can go back through all these steps whenever you want. So let's go ahead and delete all the layers that I made for you. So the first step, just like we've been doing all afternoon or all morning together rather, is to activate the layer or multiple layers that you want to apply this effect on. Then what you want to do is, if it is multiple layers, you want to create a stamped copy by pressing Shift-Option-Command-E on a Mac or Shift-Alt-Control-E on a PC. Since we just got one layer in this document, I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate it by pressing Command or Control-J. The next thing we want to do is we want to change the blend mode of this layer to divide. This particular blend mode does a couple different things. What it does is it divides the color in the duplicate or stamped layer by the color in your original layer, and it really just significantly brightens the image almost to the point of being solid white. But the next thing that we're going to do is going to fix that part, so don't let that freak you out. So with the duplicate or stamped layer set to the blend mode of divide, we're going to run a small amount of Gaussian blur on it. So let's go ahead and just run the blur on the image. With this one, we're not going to do a smart filter. We're just going to run that blur filter. So choose Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And for most images, this image is about 2,500 pixels by 2,700 pixels. I can get away with about a 10-pixel blur. You're going to need to experiment with that number. Okay. Then we're going to click OK to close that dialog. Now what I need to do is to create a single layer from all of the layers in my document. So we're going to use that stamped copy technique here, but I'm going to go ahead and double-click my background layer so it's not named background because I have a feeling that will make this stamped keyboard shortcut not function. So go ahead and press Shift-Option-Command-E or Shift-Alt-Control-E on a PC. And you can see that we're almost to a colored pencil sketch already. Now let's go ahead and convert that stamped copy into Smart Filters. So choose Filter, Convert for Smart Filters, and then we're going to go back up to the Filter menu to the Artistic category, and we're going to choose Poster Edges, or Poster Edges rather. Now we have the world's largest dialog that we saw earlier, and I'm just using the little zoom controls at the bottom left of the dialog so that I can see the whole image. You'll need to experiment with these settings over here in the Filter Gallery dialog to your liking, but what I usually do is I set them all at 1 and then I experiment from there. For this particular image, a setting of 1 works pretty well, but you can see as I change those and then Photoshop redraws the preview that you can get different effects with stronger numbers. But for this particular image, a setting of 1 works fine. So do start at 1 and then just experiment from there. Click OK. Now what we're going to do is change the blend mode of this layer to something in the darken category. So I like to choose multiply for that one. Gives us a little bit of a darker effect. And now we're going to lower the opacity of this Smart Object layer to something that looks good to us. So already we've got quite a nice colored pencil sketch going on here. Now the next thing that I want to do to change the colors, let's say I want to make a solid color pencil sketch, or I just want to adjust the saturation of the sketch colors, we're going to do what we did with that glamour-glow effect. We're going to add a hue saturation adjustment layer. So let's click the half black, half white circle, choose hue saturation, and then if I want to create a solid color sketch, then I'm going to turn on colorize, and then I can adjust the hue slider, and you can have any kind of colored sketch that you want. If you just want to change the colors that are in the sketch, don't turn on colorize, and just drag the hue slider around, and you'll see that the colors are changing as we're doing that. And if you go over to the blue realm on the hue slider here, we're going to actually begin to introduce some nice greens and reds. And of course with all of this, to adjust the strength, you can just adjust the layer opacity of the individual layers to get the effects that you want. Now I know that one was kind of involved, but when Yaz posts the video of this, then y'all are going to be able to see it redone. It is a little bit involved, but it is oh so worth it. This is a nice little effect to have in your bag of tricks. And the last thing I want to show you is sharpening, and this is a super fast one. And friends, when you learn how to sharpen this way, you're just not going to want to sharpen any other way. This is the only way in Photoshop that you can sharpen with a preview of the edges in your image that are actually going to be sharpened. So I'm going to show you 2 different ways to do that with our little doggy picture here. So I'm going to delete the layer that I made for you. Super simple way to do this is to, if you're dealing with a single layer image, just duplicate the layer by pressing Command or Control J. If you're dealing with a multiple layer image, you can create that stamped copy that we've been using by pressing Shift Option Command E or Shift Alt Control E on a PC. Sometimes Photoshop doesn't like its keyboard shortcuts. There we go. Now we're going to come up to the Filter menu, choose Other, High Pass. This is the only way in Photoshop to see the edges of your image that will be affected should you choose to sharpen. There's only one number that you need to mess with, and all you really have to remember about this dialog is that you don't ever want to go above 4 pixels for your sharpening here with the high pass filter. See, as I go above 4, see these sharpening halos that start to introduce themselves? And sharpening is really just Photoshop looking for areas of high contrast, making the dark pixels darker and the light pixels lighter. But what happens is when you over sharpen, you introduce what looks like a light colored gap in between your areas of high contrast, so you don't want to do that. So for the high pass filter, you want to stick with a radius of 4 or less. And for most normal-ish sized images, and I'm talking enough pixels to print at high resolution, you're going to be somewhere around 2 or 1.5. When I click OK, Photoshop runs the filter, and then we just need to choose a blend mode that drops out this gray color. So from the blend mode menu at the top of the layers panel, we're going to choose overlay, and that's it. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see our dog's detail here. So here's the before, and there's the after. So a great way to sharpen your images. We are equal opportunity sharpeners here at the Nelson household, so let's go ahead and sharpen this little kitty. So this time I'm going to show you how to do it using Smart Objects. So activate the layer or layers that you want to sharpen, choose Filter, Convert for Smart Filters. Go back to the Filter menu, choose Other, High Pass, and remember you want to stick with something 4 or less. And as you drag this radius slider, the more parts of your image that begin to show up, that's the more of your image that's going to be sharpened. So if you want less sharpening, then you're going to drag the slider to the left. Now we're really only sharpening some of the ornament here and the cat's whiskers, only a little bit of the fur. But as we drag that slider to the right, then we're sharpening more and more of the image. Click OK. Now we need to change the blend mode to overlay. But if you do this as a smart filter, then you need to change the blend mode of the filter itself. So click that little, double-click that tiny little icon to the right of the high pass name in your layers panel, and that's where you want to change the blend mode to overlay. So 6 in one hand, half dozen in the other on that particular technique. Do it as a smart filter or do it as a duplicate or stamped layer, either way. But here's our before and here's our after, and it's just such a foolproof method of sharpening that I just couldn't resist sharing it with you guys. So on that note, I'm happy to take any questions. And if you want to drop me an email, lesa@photolesa.com, I'll send you the individual steps of that colored pencil sketch because I know that one was a little bit long in the tooth. And the other thing I want to mention before I go away here or open it up to questions is I want to let you know how you can get in touch with me. photolesa.com. You can sign up for my newsletter right here to stay up to date on everything that I'm doing. You can fill out the contact form to send me an email. But I also want to let you know about a free Photoshop Lightroom class I've got going on for Creative Live in January. So just read that little story right there, photolesa.com. It's completely free while it's live, January 8th through the 10th. I've also got a new little ebook that I did recently. It's about 50 pages of my favorite Photoshop tips, and you can just go to photolesa.com, click the books and video link, and you're going to find that book right here. Give that link a click, and it's going to take you to a page where you can purchase the ebook, and it's only $2.99. And I've got some nice previews of some of the tips that you'll find inside of that book right here. So pick that up if you'd like. And on that note, do you want to take some questions?
Sure. Folks, we'll take just a couple here. We are a little bit over the time limit, but we'll take just a couple here. And as Lesa was showing you on the screen, her contact information there, we're also going to push out this one slide so you can really see it. And we've also pushed out ways you can contact her in your group chat. So multiple ways you can find her contact information there. Let's take a look here. Roz would like to know, can you use smart filters in CS6?
Yes, absolutely. Smart filters have been around since CS2. Actually, because smart filters are smart objects. So the first version of Photoshop that we got smart objects is CS2. So yeah, they work. Several other versions.
Okay, and it looks like Lesa, she's asking real quick here, what is the link again to your ebook? Is it on your Photolesa?
Yeah, just go to photolesa.com and click the books and videos link, and it's the first little icon you'll see when you go to that page.
Perfect. Francine would like to know, are the filters covered in one of your books?
All of the filters are covered in glorious, comprehensive detail in Photoshop CC, the Missing Manual. So if you guys haven't picked up that book, it is not just because I wrote it, But it is the most comprehensive book on Photoshop available today. It covers every single menu item, every single filter, and I tell you why I'm having you trot through certain steps. So you learn the why behind the how so that you can apply it to other things in the program. It's comprehensive. It's very conversational. No technical jargon is used in that book whatsoever. There are a million full-color screenshots in it that I handcrafted, each and every one, and it's just a fantastic book.